Chapter 81. Racial War. 4. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The calamities people knew about were 4 in total. 1 at the sea. 1 at the roots. 1 at the trunk. 1 at the branch. And a very special one. Hansu mumbled inwardly. The first-year adventurers who had searched far and wide in order to explore the New World 20 years ago had seen the 4 kinds of calamities but didn't worry much. Since these guys seemed busy eating up the world tree and didn't really seem interested in people. While they were searching all over the world tree while avoiding the 4 calamities, Keldian and his comrades found something extremely dangerous deep within the world tree. A creature that seemed like it was being sealed by somebody. And tens of thousands of marks of those who got massacred while trying to seal that creature. The 6 powers that were controlling the wide world tree mountain range heard the news and then quickly gathered to the location of the seal. And they realized that this thing was more dangerous than the calamities if it were to get released. But this guy looked like an incomplete creature unlike the completed life forms such as the calamities. Like something somebody had failed while making it. And it was weaker than the calamities because of that, but unlike the calamities who weren't really interested in people, this thing was showing extreme reactions against living creatures. They hadn't included it in the calamities because it was an incomplete product, but then if this thing were to go on a rampage after getting out, then the people who came after them will just get killed without being able to do anything. No, they would get swept over too. Their family might come after them. They couldn't leave this behind and go up. But then they had no methods of killing it. Since being slightly weaker than the calamities meant that it was much stronger than humans. So they only had one option. They first put their powers around 6 trunks near the location of the seal in order to block random people from getting to the seal. Since if they, the strongest, were guarding it, then nobody would be able to get to the seal as well. At the same time they decided to keep it a secret from them as well. Since it would be dangerous for them to know about such a dangerous existence, and people who get blinded by the greed of reward will come out. And one of the 6 people who had gathered had remained behind in order to keep the seal. The man who had raised the giant power of Harem, one of the 6 pillars, without the ability of a lord and with only strength alone. Naming the creature had befallen to the one who had chosen to sacrifice himself for everyone else, and the man who had chosen to remain behind, Miyamoto, named the creature Akuma. He then realized that it was too much for him to maintain the constantly weakening seal, and then gathered people who had the potential to get strong and had the same thoughts as him as comrades. These were the 7 departed souls. The protectors who hadn't gone up and were protecting the seal for tens of years. I don't know why that guy had failed in creating this thing, but kill the Akuma first, then take these guys to kill the Ouroboros. But Sophia's expression didn't change while looking at that Hansu. What does this kid know? For calamities. They were indeed dangerous. And his confidence would probably be brimming since he had killed 2 of them. But if those things were natural disasters, then the thing they were sealing was like a nuclear weapon created with evil intentions. Not as strong as a natural disaster, but the fact that humans can't go up against it was the same, and it actually went against humans unlike natural disasters. But even then, I still can't ignore him. She could not ignore a person who had killed 2 of the 4 great calamities and also knew the name of Akuma. She had to talk to the leader, Miyamoto. Sophia set the intention of communicating into her mind and then took out the next question. Okay, so we're set then, but what are you going to do about the other clansmen? Sophia threw something into the air as soon as she finished talking. The small ball that left Sophia's hands got bigger and bigger as it grew to the size of a man and then rose into the air. The round object which had risen to the air suddenly opened its eyes. Then it started to show the scenery of the 6 trunks above clearly in front of Sophia. Michael was shocked as he saw this. God's white of the eye. Such a high-level skill. A skill which allowed one to see whenever they wanted in the World Tree continent as long as they fulfilled the requirements. The reason why the 7 departed souls were scary was because of that. They had collected and raised the mastery of skills and artifacts for almost 10 years. In conclusion, they had numerous artifacts that were hard for anyone to acquire one of and used high-level skills freely. And battle experience that exceeded others by a few times. There's no way they couldn't be strong. But Camille groaned from a different reason than Michael's. It's not even a mess. Sophia's skill was showing them the situation above clearly. A few of the 6 pillars were reacting in a hurry to the sudden wave of parasites. But on the other hand, the pillars that were located far away from the Ouroboros tail didn't really care for as to whether the clans in the front were fighting or not, as they took everything they needed and were taking their clan upwards. Though the 6 pillars who were fighting looked like heroes of justice, it wasn't really that. The pillars that were fighting were only doing so because they had gotten close. They still made sure to maintain their power as they fell backwards. Michael clicked his tongue as he saw this. That's the right decision. 2 days. It was long but at the same time very short. Everyone probably realized this. That it'll take about 2 weeks in order for the Ouroboros to come down. Though it won't be as good as the library Sophia had, there were plenty of traits that were similar. If they get those traits, experience and combine it with the data handed down through the 6 pillars, then it wasn't that hard to realize that that thing will come down in 2 weeks. If the Ouroboros didn't come down, then there might be some clans who decide to fight. But since that thing's descent was decided, everyone chose to ran. With as much of their power maintained as possible. What are you going to do? Solve that first. If you show me that, then I'll believe you. If they couldn't even block the parasites charging over there, then they couldn't even progress after that. Hansu pondered for a moment at those words and then got up. God damn it. The other clans aren't coming. What about Harem? Damn it. Damage will increase if they get through. We have to block them here. No matter what. 2 of the 6 pillars, Helper Clan and the Triple Lights Union, were blocking the tide-like parasites as they screamed out. A green-colored skill of one of the celestial generals from the Triple Lights Union exploded towards the parasites crawling down from above. Somebody who didn't know every well about these things would have been scared to their wits. To send attacks towards the Ouroboros above. What would they do if the Ouroboros got enraged? But the celestial general didn't even put that into his calculations. Fuck. If an attack like this worked on it, then I wouldn't even be scared. Boom. A circle which was of tens of meters in radius had turned into ashes and tens of parasites had turned into dust, but as he expected, the Ouroboros didn't react at all. Since the Ouroboros was too lazy to move just because its scales were a bit scratched. Though it had worked out as he planned, his expression wasn't that great. These damn things. They're too big. Since the bodies of the parasites were huge, there weren't many of them who fell in the range of a large area skill. And killing few tens of them didn't even dent their numbers. The space that had been emptied by the ones dead had been quickly refilled by those who were constantly pushing down the road to hell upon the body of the Ouroboros. Bitch, Harem, pillars, you despicable bastards. For not a single one of you to show up. But the celestial general knew as well. That there was no reason for them to shed blood and come help. The reason why the Triple Lights Union and the Helper Clan were fighting was not because they had a hidden mission or anything. Though something like that might have existed in the beginning of the 6 pillars, but in the near 20 years that the clans existed for, the clan members had been replaced over and over again. What has been left now were not ideals but rather reality. The reason why they were fighting here was because the damned tail of the Ouroboros that acted as the path for the charging parasites was located in between the Helper Clan and Triple Lights Union. Since their main base would get wrecked if they didn't block them. But their situation wasn't something they would curse over. We shall also guard for a bit and then maintain our formations as we get out. Though they didn't feel comfortable about the adventurers below, but they couldn't do anything. It was impossible for the adventurers below to raise their strength to the point where they can get through the mirror in 2 days anyways. It might be possible if all the clans focused on doing so, but no one had the leisure to do so. While they were grinding their teeth, a huge sound wave was heard in the distance. Though this wasn't the time for him to get distracted, the Celestial General had been in the other world too long to ignore an extremely strong existence that pervaded all their detection skills. Monumental air path. Who has a skill like this? And something like this meant that they had increased the mastery to the extremes. The Celestial General heard the sound wave coming from the base route and then looked over towards that direction. Sophia Vajra. The 7 departed souls were in an awkward situation with the 6 pillars. Their relationship wasn't good but wasn't that bad. Damn it. There's no way someone like her would help either. Even from the start it would be a piece of cake for someone like her to just go through the mirror when something like this happened. At that time something bulky started to form in Sophia's hands. Green, white and blue lights intertwined and then turned into a jade-colored dot. Then the jade-dot-colored marble made a huge noise as it flew over the sky. Clink. The marble which had flown over the sky while drawing out a jade line on its path landed between the swarming parasites. Clang. Soon the surface started to freeze up along with the explosion. Crackle crackle bdnvl in an instant an area many times larger than the Celestial General's attack froze up and all the parasites within that area turned into frozen statues. Oh my God! The Celestial General saw that scene as his eyes fluttered. People spoke of the 7 departed souls but there was never an occasion where they would actually see them. Since they had heard that people like them played around up above. But what he had heard was the truth after seeing it himself. The Ouroboros that didn't even react to the previous attack trembled. Which meant that they had gotten on its nerve quite a bit. It didn't even seem like she went all out. And she wasn't alone either. Who's that next to her? A face he had never seen before. Everyone's gazes including the Celestial General's turned to Sophia and Hansu next to her. Hansu then got lost in thought as he pondered while looking at the countless amounts of parasites crawling down from the giant tail of the Ouroboros in front of him. Is this decision the right one? If he went into action then he can hold on to all the people from the 6 pillars in this spot. No, he can actually make them fight more desperately. And he will help with the relics of the arsenal. The damage from the parasites would not increase. But the parasites weren't the important part. Isn't there a method of killing the Ouroboros without doing all of this? It wasn't a sin to struggle to survive and these guys trying to escape through the mirror had quite a normal reaction. But if he were to fail at killing the Ouroboros after all this then he will be throwing all of the people from the 6 pillars, who could have escaped, into death. But Hansu made up his mind. There's no other way. Somebody had to fight against these parasites. It was arduous enough for him to focus on the Akuma and Ouroboros themselves. Light started to shine around Hansu who was standing above the frozen scales of the Ouroboros. Keying the huge amount of energy from the fragment that was being controlled by the 3 relics started to gather on the tip of the Galadriel's relic in Hansu's hands. Soon the light from the Galadriel's relic turned into a huge golden hammer instead of a sword. Hansu then jumped down as he smashed the hammer down onto the center of the tail of the Ouroboros. Quang! A roar that shook the heavens and the earth resonated throughout the pillars and the lake and in all directions. At the thunder-like sound Jukma, who was commanding his clansmen, quickly looked towards the location where the sound and the light came from. And then frowned. What is happening now? Kururururu, the tail of the Ouroboros which didn't even react until now started to react quite agitatedly. It then started to aggressively push in its tail in between the 6 pillars as if it was trying to find the rat that had disturbed its tail. Boom! Boom! A few more thundering sounds rang out. The tail kept on poking in between the pillars as if it was trying to find the one annoying it numerous times. The tail that was throwing off the tens of thousands of parasites on it laid down as if it got lazy since the thing that had agitated it stopped. The problem was that the spot the tail landed was the center of the lake, the mirror. God damn it. Jukma looked at this scene with disbelief. Chase until the end if you're going to chase. Why did it stop in such a place? Soon the parasites that had come down on the tail filled up the lake as they crawled out in all directions. Chirururic, though the depth of the lake was rather deep, it was just a normal lake other than the single day in which it acted as the mirror. It wasn't an obstacle to the 4M. Large parasites. The lake was extremely wide, but there were enough parasites to fill it up many times over. Jukma's expression turned extremely ugly at this scene. Now it would be impossible for them to get into the mirror without getting through that with all their strength. In what was this different from a war? And now all the people on the surface of the red zone would get massacred. Which crazy bastard? At that time a carrier pigeon flew in. Jukma, who had heard the message within the carrier pigeon, grinded his teeth as he got up. That I believe some talk is needed. Let's go. Jukma ordered Emil Staden and started to gather up a few people. Chapter 82. Akuma, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Jukma looked at his surroundings. There were a few familiar faces. Patriarch of Lighthouse, Michael, and Patriarch of Helper, Gitchell, and other patriarchs of the 6 great clans. And their guards that they had fought with since the base roots. Though they had gathered from time to time if there were things to discuss, but this was the first time when all 6 had gathered like this. A very rare event if one took account of the patriarchs of the 12 roots who would arrive soon. But there was no time to chit-chat. Since the clansmen of the 6 clans were shedding blood while going against the parasites even at this moment. Jukma looked at Michael as he spoke. I heard that you crawled into the devil's mouth. Is that thing coming down you're doing? The thing which had been quiet for 20 years suddenly went on a rampage. There was only one thing that could affect that giant thing. Jukma grinded his teeth at Michael, who didn't reply. I don't care if you kill the calamity fish and cook it up or make a salad out of the devouring and vomiting root, but you should at least do it so you don't bring us harm. You aren't going to share the things you gained with us anyway, right? At those words a few people who had been quite dissatisfied nodded their heads. The fact that he killed the calamities was amazing. But what of it? It might be different if they were going to stay here longer, but the red zone's peace did not matter to them who were going to go up soon. There wasn't anything bad but nothing really good about it either. If it ended at the Ouroboros coming down, then they wouldn't have really said anything. But to block their escape hole. Jukma, who had seen the 5-to-1 scenario, made a satisfied expression as he got to the main point. I won't stretch it out long. Bring that Kong Hansu guy. Since it wasn't just your clan's doing. Kong Hansu. The guy who had acted out without any fear and saying that he will kill the calamity fish. They scoffed at him at first. But they could not anymore. Since they knew that 2 of the 4 great calamities had been killed by that guy. But they didn't really feel like congratulating him. Kong Taeho, who held the responsibility as the union head of the Triple Lights Union, quietly listened and then spoke out. Bring that guy. If he had killed 2 of the 4 great calamities, then he should know something about this situation too. From the start they had never even considered the fact that Hansu killed the calamity fish with his battle strength. Since logic still existed. Sophia Vardra, who had gotten strong at an illogical pace with her trait, library, still took 3 years to get strong. Him getting that strong when it hasn't even been a month since the tutorial ended had not entered their brains. Which meant that the thing they needed was the intel and the method to solve the current situation. Who? I'm going to go crazy. Kong Taeho signed inwardly. For them to rely on one person in solving such an emergency situation. They were that desperate. There was no way for them to drive all of the things from the lake out with their current gear. Michael grinded his teeth inwardly as he saw the other clan patriarchs glaring at him. That crazy bastard. For him to really do it. He wanted to block them, but there was no way for him to. How could they block one of the 7 departed souls with just 150 people? Hansu answered quite simply. Once logic and reality got too far apart from each other, people tended to think of logic more than reality. There weren't any words more suitable than newcomer to make them drop their guard. Especially more so if the person was an existence that defied all rules like the one in front of him. No one would have thought that this guy would have gotten this strong. Michael, who had finished thinking about the conversation he had with Hansu, thought of the objects that guy had found after the battle. This is more than enough for the reward for killing the calamity. Michael finished his thoughts after bringing up the image of the millions of weapons that had poured out from the air. I don't know where he went. But I have thoughts of sharing the things I've obtained. What? The moment his words ended, the clansmen of Lighthouse who had received the orders held on to huge amounts of items as they slowly walked towards the pillars. Jukma squinted his eyes as he saw the clansmen of Lighthouse walking towards them from the distance. Chwajajajak, Sophia and Hansu, who had gotten out in the small frame after they had smashed the tail of the Ouroboros, hadn't gotten as far away as Jukma and Michael had thought. They were headed towards the heart of the world tree that was located above the lake where the pillars sprouted from. Sophia Vergara, who had applied stealth, which was a side effect of mastering the monumental air path to the extreme, felt a cold sweat running down her back from the extreme amounts of mana that she could feel behind her. This is a newcomer. But being surprised is being surprised, and grasping the truth was grasping it. There was a need to dissect his battle strength objectively. Sophia looked over Hansu with her eyes at the same time she used the skill, Monumental Air Path. Though it's amazing. There's a limit to transferring this to his battle power. It was a huge amount of mana for sure. But there was a limit on how much of this mana Hansu could actually absorb. Since there was a difference between using it for himself and spreading it in all directions. Like how a power plant didn't use all the energy it generated. But he should still be stronger than myself. Sophia was angry, but she decided to recognize the things she needed to recognize. She hadn't fought him, but it had been long since he had gone past the line where she needed to fight him to realize it. Though it wasn't an infinite amount of mana, but an amount of mana that had exceeded the limit of a human with that much mana control. Though he had only a few gears on, every one of them looked depressing. He might really be able to get Akuma. But Sophia shook her head. This guy was quite amazing too, but Akuma was a thing that made one scared the moment one saw it. The judgment will be given by the leader, Miyamoto. The 6 huge pillars that towered up from the grounds got closer and closer to each other as they went further up and eventually combined into one. And there was a very small tunnel in the center of the location where the 6 pillars connected to each other. An entrance that was covered with various skills and artifacts. Hansu and Sophia went past that entrance and then followed the vertical tunnel in the center of the world tree as they climbed up. At that location the other 6 people who had received Sophia's message were gathered. Miyamoto Junichi. Kyle Cooper. Beck Jongsang. Ark Mariangt. Yoruba. Tina Charlize. And 7 including herself. Hansu looked over to the thing that was located in the center of the giant area behind the 7 people. Something that had been pierced with a giant spear and had been tied down with huge chains. Its body couldn't be seen because the chains had tightly and heavily tied him down, but the evil aura was spreading out through the chains. Hansu mumbled as he saw the thing that looked like an egg of something. Akuma. Weirdly, there wasn't a divine stone fragment within the hidden 5th calamity. The 5th divine stone fragment existed within the located in the top of the world tree as far as he knew. A structure where the energy of the fragment on the top of the world tree plummeted straight down onto this place. Basically it had a different mana wave than Hansu's mana wave. Maybe the reason why that thing's so vile is because it doesn't have a stable energy within its body like the other calamities. Hansu looked at the tens of thousands skeletons spread around the Akuma. 2 of the 5 great tiger generals who had came to kill the incomplete calamity and had gotten killed. Ikim and Kaghun. And their relics, the chain scythe and spear. Though those 2 had failed, they had succeeded in sealing the incomplete calamity, Akuma. By using the energy of the divine stone fragment that plummeted down from the top of the world tree. Though it seems like that thing acts as the thing that protects that guy. In conclusion, they had turned the Akuma into a pause mode with the energy that would have gotten into the Akuma instead, but on the other hand the seal was acting as a protection towards that thing. If he were to pull out the chains in order to kill him, then the energy flowing into the chains will flow into Akuma and cause it to gain back its strength again. The 7 departed souls were managing that energy so as much of the energy as possible flowed into the chains and not into the Akuma. It seems it doesn't like intruders in the system. As another person, Hansu, came into the mana wave, the calm breath of the Akuma got slightly faster as the chains shook. Like a living creature becoming much more vicious. This might be one of the reasons why Keldian had decided to keep this place a secret. Miyamoto looked at Hansu and spoke with a happy expression. Oh. Is this the friend? The friend our youngest one has brought. Anyways. For you to want to kill the Akuma. Miyamoto laughed with a peaceful expression. 20 years since he had guarded this place. This new friend was a type that provoked one's curiosity in numerous ways. To know about the Akuma and even say he wanted to kill it. But there was something he could guess. Did one of my friends who had found the Akuma with me before leave behind a record somewhere? The owners of the 6 pillars who had found this place along with him. If one of them had left behind a record and this guy had found it, then it was something that he could believe. Shall we see? His will was good, but if his strength didn't support it, then it was just useless. He understood that this guy called Hansu was strong, but he had seen the Akuma for too long to get shocked by that. But Miyamoto could only be surprised once he saw the relics that were around Hansu. The 2 around the Akuma weren't the only ones. For there to be 3 more. The others were a bit confused, but Miyamoto, who had guarded the Akuma for longer than them, knew instantly when he saw it. That the 3 relics around Hansu were the same type as the 2 on Akuma's body. Good. It seems I can strengthen the seal even more. Miyamoto smiled brightly. It was getting harder to suppress the Akuma, who was getting more and more vicious anyway. With those relics he will be able to suppress it with a stronger seal for a while. Things will become easier. Miyamoto spoke as he looked at Hansu. Let's tie down the seal on the Akuma with those for now. Then our movements will become easier, so we will be able to handle the parasites below. You can leave in between then. You haven't seen the Akuma, so you probably spoke like that. Look over there. Can you kill that thing? Miyamoto then pointed towards the egg that was giving off an aura that twisted one's body. There wasn't much to talk about Ouroboros, that incomplete creature was sending off such an aura. According to Miyamoto's logic, killing the Akuma and the Ouroboros was not possible. It might be different once the Ouroboros came down, but with this current situation they had to save the people who can go through the mirror before the Ouroboros came down and the Akuma got released. Hansu shook his head at those words. Since that guy was thinking the exact opposite of what he was planning. Why would he have smashed the tail of the Ouroboros onto the lake? Well. He might not know that I've done that yet. Since he had come up right after he hit the tail, this guy might not know it if he was focused on the Akuma's seal. Hansu sighed quietly. The 7 worlds that started out from the red zone. And the 7 legacies left behind by the fallen races. Revive them all and use them to strengthen the human race. The first stage was the world tree. He had to kill the 5 calamities here, collect the divine stone fragments, complete the divine stone, revive the world tree and use the relic to control the world tree. It wasn't anyone's wrongdoing, but their views were different. Since he was looking at the bigger picture, the people who were living in the moment could not understand it. In order for them to understand, he needed to reveal the future story, but then the invasion would get faster. I wonder how many times something like this will happen. Hansu shook his head and then spoke. I shall decline. What? The seal needs to get destroyed. The relic isn't something to be used that way. Miyamoto's eyelids were slightly raised at Hansu's words. Chapter 83. Akuma, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Miyamoto breathed in and out from Hansu's words and the spoke. You really speak of it easily. Do you even know how many of us would die while you kill the Akuma? Miyamoto replied coldly. They had all gathered here with some sense of justice. Since they knew how many people the job they had could save. But the problem changed once they had to put their lives on the line. I'm honestly scared. Miyamoto mumbled inwardly. He had felt two things inside of him during the time when he had ruled over the World Tree Mountain ranges with Chaldean, Eries, and those who were his friends and enemies. First, he had lost fear. Secondly, he gained fear. These two contradictory feelings existed. He had lost fear. He had been able to crash through this world because he had a bit of talent and he had gotten stronger as he ruled over the red zone. By the time he found the Akuma he had a huge power following him, and because his strength was also great he had the confidence that he wouldn't fall behind anyone. The time frame in which he had struggled to survive had passed, and the time in which he had struggled to get strong had also passed. Of course he lost fear when no human and beast could go up against him. At the same time he felt fear. This was just the first world. But things like the four calamities roamed around and things like the Akuma were hidden. He couldn't even guess what could be in the next world through the coldly transparent lake. If he were to get to the next world, then he had to struggle again in order to survive and get stronger. But the others didn't seem to have any notion of fear as they started to walk towards the mirror. While the other people prepared to go through the mirror with different thoughts, he on the other hand endlessly pondered and pondered. He was scared of change to go over, but then nervousness and his pride from staying caused him to fall into pondering. At the moment he was thinking about this, the Akuma that had appeared. And the single sacrifice that was needed. Miyamoto swimmingly said that he will take that role. Though it looked like he had given up a chance for the greater cause, and the others had seen him that way, but at least on Miyamoto's situation, it was a very satisfactory choice. Since the Akuma had provided him a very good haven of mind. No one could threaten him in the red zone since he had constantly gotten stronger for 20 years as long as he maintained the seal on the Akuma. A moment's choice had turned Miyamoto quite comfortable for the past 20 years. And the pillar, Harem, that he had raised praised him like a god every once a while he visited them. But the guy in front of him was trying to break that peace. Miyamoto started to ponder as he saw that Hansu. Damn it. I heard that he was a dumbass, but for him to be this much. If this guy released the seal for the Akuma and then failed to kill it, then it didn't just end at why would that guy let them tie him that easily. If Hansu couldn't kill the guy who was released, then that thing will cause a catastrophe. His life will be endangered too. It won't do. Miyamoto shook his head as he spoke. I can't agree with you. We cannot undo the seal. Do you know how many people you will be killing if you fail? Hansu didn't reply to Miyamoto's words as he started to raise his energy. Keying soon Hansu's body started to get surrounded by a bright light. The three relics started to pull out the fragment's energy to the extremes. In a different manner than from before, beyond the limit that one can control with the relics. Kudududuk, the mana storm started to swirl in all directions. It started to get overloaded as it went beyond the limit Hansu could control. Miyamoto made a cold expression as he looked at that Hansu. So you're trying to solve it with strength, huh? I definitely cannot let you go then. Miyamoto and the other six raised the power in their bodies as they started to block the entrance heading towards the Akuma. At this time something unexpected happened. Kuduk, ha! Miyamoto made a dumbfounded expression at the thing that had flown past him and onto Hansu. Something that was extremely familiar. The objects he had seen for 20 years. The chain scythe and the spear. The two relics that had been surrounding the Akuma flew towards Hansu when Hansu poured out an enormous amount of energy towards the other three relics as if they were magnets. As if they were made as a set from the start. God damn it. Miyamoto hurriedly looked behind him. Since the mana wave that were coursing around them like a storm had calmed down due to the two relics, but the vicious aura behind Miyamoto exploded out. The beastly life form that had a human's form unlike the other calamities. Miyamoto looked at that Akuma and then shouted at Hansu. You crazy bastard! What are you doing? Do you think we'll work with you if you do this? Hansu then looked at Miyamoto with a befuddled expression and spoke. What are you talking about? You guys just watch. Don't interrupt. What? I'll kill the Akuma alone. I can kill it. Miyamoto had decided that it wasn't possible after seeing him use 3 relics. But since he had collected all 5 relics, he could go up against the Akuma without the help of the other 7 departed souls. Since he didn't need these guys for the Akuma in the first place. The problem was the Ouroboros after that. There's no time because of that goddamn clone. He didn't have any plans of persuading these guys according to his original plan. Since he was going to wait until his racial metamorphosis cooldown after killing up to the root. But as long as the clone was connected to the Ouroboros, he had to kill it. The Ouroboros is stronger than Akuma. Even if the Ouroboros was weakened by the poison, it was a complete creature unlike the Akuma. It had a divine stone fragment within it and employed all of its energy. If he wanted to beat the Ouroboros without the racial metamorphosis and only with the 5 relics, then he needed the help of these guys. But on the other hand, if he went over the current hurdle, then things will actually become easier. Let's think positive. He had obtained the 1,000 soldier armors and it was going to go on like this anyway. Since all of the calamities coming down one by one after him having decided to kill one was normal. They hadn't gone over each other's territory because they were cautious of each other. Even if the clone didn't come back, the Ouroboros would have come down anyway. Should I have killed the calamity fish a bit slower? With his abilities, he probably could have turned his runes into 100% with just 3 months. It would have been easier if he had hunted it afterwards. But Hansu shook his head. TSK, the total number of people who have already been dragged into the otherworld should be 2 billion. According to the alchemist's calculations, then the next year's estimated entrance number would be around 4.2 billion. If 5% of them died off in a month, then 200 million would die, and in 3 months almost 600 million would die. The invasion of the abyss is a problem too. Hansu warmed up his body as he spoke. Decide after you see me fighting. To whether I can kill the Ouroboros or not, who would believe them if one just told them? If he was going to fight with them while entrusting his back to them, then forcing them into it is meaningless. I shall show it to them first, and if they still don't follow, then I'll use other methods. Hansu started to focus on the 5 relics. The 7 marbles of Ecchidrang's relic one by one fit in between the extremely long chain. Shararururu, the chain started to take form like an Imugi asterisk and floated around Hansu's body. A mana storm like from before didn't rage out from the body of Hansu, who had a spear on his left hand and a sword on his right, but the amount of intimidation he let out was not even comparable to before. The golden energy, which used to rage like the wind and course through the air, got controlled to the extremes and solidified almost into a liquid form and surrounded Hansu. Hansu spoke towards the 7 behind him while controlling the relics. Oh. By the way. If you are thinking of helping out, then don't hesitate. Just jump in. You said you are going to fight it alone. What are you saying? It's better to crush it with numbers if you can. Hansu ended with those words as he charged forward. Ongjukma made a strange expression at the 5 different artifacts surrounding his body. Sword. 7 marbles. Bracelet. Iron chains. Spear. Jukma moved his eyes from the artifact and then looked at the battle in the distance. Boom. Pour it. Wawahaha. It's amazing. The clansmen, who were on the defensive before, were jumping here and there and pouring out skills as if they were happy from the new gears or had gotten some leisure. It was obvious. Since he would have done so too. Weapons and armors that can pour out strong mana reinforcements without worrying about mana. It was like being able to use ultimate skills without a limit, so how could it not be fun? A strong mana that was supplied along with their 5 new weapons. When these two things combined with the existing skills of the clansmen, the parasites, which seemed to be almost crushing the humans, were blocked by the defensive formation of the 6 clans and could not proceed. Of course it was hard for them to advance as well due to the endless amounts of parasites that came out, but they could at least prevent injuries at this rate. And because of this, Jukma, who had some leisure, turned his eyes towards a different location. Michael. That damned bastard. He hid the real good ones. He was quite shocked when Michael peacefully handed these out. Since these weapons were really strong. One could see just from the clansmen who were fighting in the distance. But the important part wasn't the weapon. Mana wave, huh? The quality of the 5 gears that seemed like relics was quite high. But they also had weapons like these. The important thing was the mana wave. The mana wave that turned these weapons into peerless treasures. Jukma looked at Emil because of this. Emil. Can you feel it? Yes. It's moving bit by bit. He could feel it though it was very minute. This mana wave was coming off from one place as the center. I can't tell exactly where the center is, but I can at least recognize that it is moving. The flow of the mana, which was moving very subtly, was giving them information. And another thing. I don't know who has it, but if they can use it this delicately, then turning it on and off would be within their power too. And not only turning it on and off. They might be able to send the mana to some people and sever it from the others. There was no other reason why Michael had peacefully given them the weapons. What did it matter when their lives were in his hands? Even if he just cut off the mana supply to the other 5 pillars, it would already be a huge profit for Michael. You ordered the clans beneath the mountain and are collecting the adventurers from all around, right? Emil Staden nodded at those words. Since it was war now. They needed more numbers in order to advance over their defenses. And because of this, the 6 pillars and the 12 routes were calling every single adventurers out there to this location. Usually it would be hard to move around because of beasts, but for some reason there weren't many beasts. Thanks to this, the numerous adventurers who had been split up all around were gathering to the 6 pillars with bellies full of nutritional fluids. There's a thing I need to do before they arrive. I need to find the origin of the mana. The most important thing Jukma had realized in the other world was that leaving the sword in the opponent's hand was a truly crazy act. Allies and enemies were only a thin paper apart, and a very small event can change it all. So, don't leave the sword in other people's hands. If the enemy was holding onto a sword, then at least he needed to have one too. And better if he was the only one holding the sword. Get 20 of the search team members, cover them with relics and then send them off in all directions. Search the range limit of the mana wave. We will find its origin that way. The relics wouldn't work once they went past the range of the mana wave. If the mana spread out in a spherical shape, then they just needed to find the range limit and then find the center. Keying, while Emil Staden was sending a message, the mana wave that was surrounding them rocked back and forth like a wave. Emil and Jukma both frowned at this change. Since it got easier to find the center because of this change, but they also knew that the other clansmen would also react quickly. We should move quickly. Jukma, who had quickly guessed the location of the origin of the mana wave, frowned slightly as he started to send orders in all directions. Translator's note: Imyugi is a mythical Korean creature that is in a stage before becoming a dragon. The legend is that when a constrictor, a Leif Shrenki, stays inside cold waters for 1,000 years, then it will ascend into the heavens as a dragon. The Imyugi is basically a stage in between these two. Constrictor. Imyugi. Dragon. The dragon image is an image of Chungryong or Azure Dragon, one of the 4 great mythical creatures, because why not? Hope this clarified some things and helped you learn a bit more. Longest TL note ever. He. Proofreaders note regular chapter 2/3. 4 other stories with emojis, King Shura and legendary Moonlight Sculptor are good reads. Chapter 84. Akuma, 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Boom. Boom. Shockwaves from the Akuma's and Hansu's clash resonated in all directions. To the point where that force went past where they were standing and even shook the pillars of the world tree very minutely. Sophia looked at Miyamoto and asked carefully while observing this scene. Aren't you going to help? Though the others might see the 7 departed souls to be at the same level as each other, and though this was true, their leader Miyamoto was different. There was a clear difference between the other 6 and Miyamoto. And a much larger difference than people thought. Miyamoto gave a short reply at Sophia's words. Wait. That guy said he'll do it alone. Yes. Miyamoto looked at the battle between Hansu and the Akuma and squinted his eyes after silencing Sophia. He could probably kill the Akuma with that much. How does this make sense? That's a newcomer. It wasn't that he didn't understand how that guy had gotten so strong so fast. Though people thought that one needed time to get strong in the other world, this was only half correct. Time is needed in order to get strong in the other world. This was obvious. Since you needed time in order to collect strong artifacts, runes and skills and at the same time raise the mastery of those skills and nail down battle experience onto your body. And as long as somebody didn't provide these things to you, it would take an extreme amount of time for one to slowly raise their power step by step and get stronger. But on the other hand, this meant that getting strong would just take a moment once that person acquires all of this. Strong artifacts could be handed down. Skill runes were the same. Higher level skills showed more might than mastered lower level skills even if their mastery was low. For his mindset, there's no need to polish it if they had already gone through the tutorial. Once one obtains the above things, then it wouldn't take long to get runes. They can receive that too. But battle experience was different. What the hell was he in real life? Like being able to see the difference in games despite the players using the same character, there is a huge difference in battle power with the same runes, skills and artifacts. Turning the above things into diamonds or leaving them as ores were all upon the user's experience and talent. And this wasn't something that could be gained in just a few days, unlike the other things. But that guy over there was fighting much more proficiently than him, who had been living in the red zone for 20 years. As if he was squeezing out everything he had. If I hadn't stayed still and went up, then I would have already reached heights that he wouldn't even be able to fathom. A reproach which came from greed, jealousy and himself, who had denied progression. He didn't have such thoughts until now, since there wasn't anybody stronger than him. Since he was the king of the red zone. If you excluded the calamities, then the 6 pillars and even the other 6 departed souls could not ignore his orders. Though he had been stationary for 20 years, he never had thoughts of himself being stationary. Since everyone else was below him. But seeing the newcomer in front of him fighting made him feel like his 20 years had been wasted. Damn it. This is annoying. Miyamoto clenched his teeth, but he stabilized his breath and then started to figure out the current situation. He needed to hide his emotions for the moment. He had to decide the next set of events from now on. Miyamoto, who had glanced at Hansu who was pushing the Akuma back, started to calculate it quickly within his head. He needed to set up a goal first. The utmost important rule that he had followed until now. Calmness of the mind and safety of the body. Hansu's goal seemed simple. Kill the Akuma and then kill the Ouroboros with their help. The problem was that this set of events was going against his goal. Should I say I won't do it? Though there were parasites below, it would be extremely easy to get out once the Akuma was gone. But would that guy leave him alone? That guy was the guy who had charged in order to kill the calamity fish as soon as he came in. Though Miyamoto didn't know Hansu's goals, killing the Ouroboros would be a must. And that guy had appealed very strongly. That he needed their help. He will try to use whatever methods he has in order to take them to kill the Ouroboros. Damn it. I feel more anxious since I don't know what his trait is. The worst situation is him maybe, just maybe having a Lord trait. The Lord symbol from weaker ones could not control them, but if that guy had the Lord trait then the story changes. Though he had heard that one of his traits were similar to that of Sophia's, but there was always a possibility of hidden cards. Since he also had two traits. If that guy charged at them, beat them down and then forced the Lord symbols onto them, then they would have to go fight with the calamities on the outside without being able to do anything. Do I really need to strike him in the back? Everything will become peaceful once that guy disappeared. Though it seemed like him leaving his sanctuary, the red zone, was inevitable, it was still much better than going and fighting the Ouroboros. But Miyamoto shook his head. It would be great if he was able to strike him in the back and kill him while he was fighting the Akuma. But what if he fails at killing him? And that guy were to successfully retreat? Then they would have to deal with the Akuma over there. I must think of a method. At that moment Miyamoto felt the strange mana flow that was searching nearby. There was no way for Miyamoto, who had experienced everything, to not know this feeling. Long-distance sight skill. It meant that somebody was looking around here. Who is it? Miyamoto squinted his eyes and then started to trace the skill. So you're telling me that the one who's creating all that noise over there is the newcomer. And the thing spinning around his body is the reason for the mana wave. Jukma, who had checked the scene of the center of the mana with Emil Staden's skill, fell into silence but then sighed. Who? I feel like I'll go crazy. What is he and what is the thing he's fighting with? He thought he had seen it wrong at the start, but it was reality. Two existences who were clashing and creating shockwaves that shook the trunk of the world tree. He finally figured out. As to who had shoved the Ouroboros tail onto the lake. He had to now throw out the label of newcomer and only believe in the things he could see. He didn't know how, but that guy had gotten unbelievably strong. Can one become like that once they take the things which drop from the four great calamities? If I knew it was something like that, then I would have actually challenged it. Jukma laughed and spoke towards Emil as if he was trying to brighten up the mood. He would have never gone in even if he knew about it. But it was true that seeing the scene from the skill made him jealous. Cancel the entry for now. Those people could only watch from the inside since there were the 7 departed souls. If they were to get caught in that, then they'll become dust. And there was something that reassured him. So the one who had the sword wasn't Michael. As long as that guy wasn't the one with the sword, then there was no obligation for him to steal the source of the mana wave. Since he couldn't steal it anyway, and a guy that strong wouldn't threaten them with the mana wave. Which meant that it was time for him to focus on the next problem. His objective is clear. Killing the Ouroboros. Shoving the parasites onto them was probably a preparation for that also. So he could focus on the Ouroboros with all his power. The best scenario is just getting out. But that seemed a bit hard. Though it didn't seem like casualties would increase while going against the parasites, but keeping the formation and charging into the center of the lake in 2 days were two entirely different problems. Which meant that there were two results. Whether that guy will fail at killing the Ouroboros. Or succeed. Nothing will change if he succeeds. But they'll get massacred if he fails. Damn this situation. It's extremely unfavorable. Jukma grinded his teeth. There was no way that the fact of his life being in the hands of one person could feel good. Even more so if the thing that guy wanted to do was extremely dangerous with a high failure rate. The best path has been decided already. Going through the lake while that guy blocked the parasites. Find his weakness. As long as he was human, then there will be an open spot somewhere. He wouldn't be invincible even if he was strong. And it wasn't that their request was hard also. For example, he wouldn't agree if they were to take a hostage and ask him to die for them. But taking a hostage and asking him to buy some time while they go through the mirror wouldn't be that hard for Hansu. Then he will probably give up and go through the mirror too. According to his thoughts, Hansu didn't have any ideas of staying in this world and throwing his life away. Once he decides that killing the Ouroboros is hard after they leave, then he will probably go into the orange zone through the mirror. Though the dangers of becoming enemies with him is created, he just needed to figure out a way to solve it then. Since this was better than sitting by idly and keeping their fate in that guy's hands. It seems like it'll be hard with just our strength. There was a need for somebody to distract Hansu while they planned things out. Damn it. Who would? While Jukma was making a frustrated expression, a carrier pigeon flew towards Jukma. This is Red Carrier Pigeon. A skill that was a level above the Blue Carrier Pigeon. Jukma slightly frowned at the familiar mana wave. Miyamoto. It's that senile old man. Why did he try to get treated like a king from time to time when he just created the clan? Of course he treated him so because it wasn't hard, but the fact that there was somebody above him in a clan where he should be at the top wasn't that pleasant to him. Since it felt like his blood was flowing the other way around every time his clansmen were caught between choosing between his and Miyamoto's orders. But Jukma decided to suppress his emotions because of the message within it. Since it seemed like they would be able to get on the same boat this time. Let's have a look. Even without the present situation, that was something he needed to do. He needed to find that guy's weakness as soon as possible and figure out his open spots. If not that guy himself, then the people around him. Even if it's you, you should at least have someone you hold dear. Boom. Jukma started to send messages towards his clansmen after seeing the Black Devil whose body was getting smashed apart while fighting with Hansu. Hook. Hook. It seems like I should be able to reach there within a day. Sangjin mumbled while looking at the world tree trunk he could see in the distance. Sangjin, who had separated from Hansu, was traveling with me, he and the people she was leading. Since it was faster to improve in a group than working alone. But during that time an emergency situation occurred in all of the World Tree Mountain Range, and thanks to that they were being carried upwards with the guidance of the people from the 6 pillars. Wah-up! Sangjin clenched his teeth after slashing his sword to cut apart a Magong charging at him. What is that guy thinking of? Sangjin thought of the time when he separated from Hansu. He wasn't worried about Hansu. And his thoughts of wanting to be with Hansu didn't change. Actually, the thing he was worried about was something else. Will that guy be at a level where he'll still need me? He didn't know why Hansu asked him to follow him rather than the others. 2 months since he had seen Hansu's face. He had also grown quite quickly. Since it seemed like he had quite a talent in this. But he heard rumors. That somebody had killed a calamity that no one could. And the fact that the person was a newcomer. It was obvious who it was. At least in Sangjin's perspective, there wasn't anyone else but Hansu who would do such a thing. Though he thought that he had grown quite quickly, the difference between him and Hansu could not be described with just words. Is there a way that I won't be a nuisance to you? Will the people who you find annoying be at the level where I can take care of them? Or do you have different thoughts? People who could annoy Hansu would be like hurricanes to him. Could he face those people? No answer appeared in Sangjin's mind. So Sangjin clenched his teeth even harder. Who? Miyamoto quietly mumbled as he saw the Akuma, who was now a corpse. Seeing the corpse affirmed that it didn't have a human's form. It was the same form as the skeleton spread around in the distance. Was it an original inhabitant of this place? Anyways, he really killed it. Does that mean the calamities who have been chopped up by this guy's hands number 3 now? He's a real talent, huh? And he had to now go against someone like him. Calm down. Miyamoto gulped at the anxiousness that he could feel all over his body in a very long time. It was better to be close if he wanted to look for an opportunity. Miyamoto, who had joined with the other 6 in order to kill the Akuma together, looked at Hansu and spoke. We will help you. Since killing the Ouroboros is the way to save the most amount of people. Even though it's a bit dangerous. There's nothing we can do about that. Since the things we have done so far were also dangerous. Use my image to the fullest. Miyamoto mumbled inwardly. His image wasn't bad. No, it was actually very good. Since the friends who had erected the pillars with him had agreed. Hansu laughed inwardly while looking at that Miyamoto. Since he could think of the words of Iris. Hansu laughed as he spoke. You chose well. Let's have a go at it together. How do I entangle him to make him work hard? It seems like I'll be busy. Hansu ended his words as he thought of the Ouroboros that should have its body tied around the trunk at the moment. Proofreader's note: regular chapter 3/3. Miyamoto think it's fine to make an enemy out of Hansu in order to step into the orange zone. Chapter 85. Ouroboros 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sangjin saw some clansmen moving about busily in the distance while going up. What is that? Sangjin tapped Mihi standing next to him. What is it? I'll go look around for a bit. Sangjin then pointed towards the clansmen roaming around in the distance. Imugi symbols that were on the backs. A symbol which symbolized the Harem that had the strength which wasn't even comparable to theirs. But those people were moving around as if they were searching for something. I need to grasp suspicious movements. The weak always had to know the actions and whereabouts of the strong. Mihi looked at Sangjin with a worried expression at those words. You're going alone. Sangjin nodded. Humans are more dangerous than beasts. Even if he were to get caught, he had to prevent Mihi from getting involved. Moving alone was easier too. Sangjin left the worrying Mihi, made some distance, and then activated his skill. A skill which he had obtained in the beginning of the red zone. A skill which caught the vibration in the air and the ground from the opponent's conversation and turned them back into voices. Its strong point was that it could spy on conversations quite a distance away and that it wouldn't be caught by others since it didn't use mana to check over the people. Sangjin configured all his skills like this in the first place. I won't be able to do anything if I try to do everything half-heartedly. Skills for going against humans and going against beasts were completely different. One needed to focus on a few selective skills in order to raise their mastery. I shouldn't get caught. With this, Sangjin, who was located quite a distance away, hid as much presence as possible and started to listen in on the conversation. Sangjin's expression froze. Why are they looking for us? He didn't know what Hansu was thinking of, but he knew what he was trying to do. Since the thing he had done was so surprising that the messages went back and forth and spread out extremely fast. He had killed 2 of the 4 great calamities. He will try to kill the next one. Sangjin raised his head and then looked at the pillars in the distance. A huge snake that struck fear into one just from its sheer size. Sangjin's mentality became chaotic as soon as he saw the snake. Hansu was busily running around in order to kill such a thing. But he was afraid of a few clansmen to the point where he was just cautiously eavesdropping on them. The gap has been increased too much. But Sangjin shook his head. He probably has a plan. Why would he have accepted me if he wasn't going to take me along? Sangjin set his mind straight and then analyzed the current situation. Hansu tried to kill the Ouroboros. At the same time the 6 pillars were looking for people who were related to Hansu. This doesn't feel good. If this was something Hansu had asked the 6 pillars to do, then they wouldn't search around like that. Hansu would have told them the name and their characteristics and told them to bring them. Which meant that those guys were searching for them without Hansu's knowledge. Damn it. They don't have good intentions. Sangjin cautiously turned his body and headed towards the direction that was away from them. He then quickly ran towards Mihi. But Sangjin frowned after returning. Oh really? So you guys are well acquainted with Kong Hansu? Wahaha. Amazing, you're friends with that famous guy. God damn it. It seems they found out after a few words. Sangjin frowned as he saw Hecarim's clansmen surrounding Mihi and people. They didn't have a lot of people, as if they came out with patrolling as the objective, so they could probably win if he joined in, but that was a crazy act. Since one of the 6 pillars wouldn't stand by idly and let them attack. That we aren't going to all get dragged along at this rate, right? They might take them all if they were going to use them as Hansu's weakness. While Sangjin was looking at this scene with anxiousness, the clansmen of Hecarim shrugged their shoulders as they spoke. Well then, hurry and go up. The battle is fierce up there. To the point where we need to borrow your strength. Sangjin and the others squinted their eyes as they saw the Hecarim clansmen laughing and moving and waving their hands. The clansmen chuckled at the people gazing at them and then spoke. What are you doing? Go up quickly. Do you think we need to keep protecting you while you go up? Just don't go astray and follow this path. It's really urgent. Understood. The Hecarim clansman disappeared with those words, and Sangjin squinted his eyes. What is he thinking? Jukma nodded and laughed as he saw the message which had flown towards him. We found them right on time. The lake will open in 1 day. He didn't know who was significant to Hansu, but he would gather everyone who had seen him and gather them all into one location. But Jukma wasn't going to interrogate them or not. Since the most important thing hasn't been confirmed yet. As to whether the hostages were meaningful in any way. He needed to know this. Since he might just piss him off if the hostages were useless in a decisive moment, so this was necessary. And because of this he needed to poke him around before using him. Check by seeing if Hansu will help them in times of danger or need. It's a bit too risky for me to do it personally. It would be a problem if the hostages didn't have an effect, but also a problem if it did. Since he would be pissing off Hansu before the lake opened. There's no way Miyamoto will help either. He would probably be wanting Jukma to do that for him. But why did he need to do it himself? Thankfully he knew the perfect candidates for such things. The newcomers who had been forcibly recruited just a while ago. Unlike the upper-level clansmen who were well known already, these guys wouldn't be a problem since they were caught in secret. There are a lot of talented people in that tutorial group. Though Hansu is like that too. There were people who shone brighter than others in that group. Like that Wang Young guy who was coming up with the clan unions. Jukma applauded after seeing his talent. Since that guy was amazing just by seeing his lord trait. But then what does that matter? There's nothing about a lord if their soldiers are weak. Exactly as he said. The reason why that guy was unlucky was that he had shown himself too much within the clan union. A white tiger will get stronger than anything else once it matures. But it will be hunted for the fur. It was suitable for them to hide their claws as a baby, but they had too much confidence in the fact that 10 clan lords had allied. Since they had tried too hard to clash with other newcomers on the end route in order to recruit strong people. And because of this they had been caught in the eyes of the Quadratus, who had been searching around to recruit newcomers under their orders, and eventually had been caught in their own eyes. If you aren't going to hide it, then grow to the point where no one else can catch up to you. Jukma, who had a bitter taste in his mouth from thoughts of Hansu, sent a message downwards. If Hansu reacts after they threaten, then the answer is simple. Throw the newly recruited guys away as used cards and take them into hostage once the chance arrives. Since Miyamoto told them that he will keep Hansu's eyes off. How could a guy who wanted to kill the Ouroboros protect a hostage by their side for the whole day? There are plenty of chances. Of course Hansu might not react at all after they threaten them. A situation which would be extremely infuriating to Jukma. Then. Those guys will just have to act as stress relievers. This had to be done after him, who was one of the 6 pillars, went out and failed at selling a product. Since I've done up to this point, at least he should attract sightseers. Jukma sent a message towards Miyamoto after finishing his thoughts. Hansu looked at the 5 shining relics in front of him. Spear. Sword. Marbles. Chains. Bracelet. With this much, it's possible to almost control half of the energy a single divine stone fragment emits. If one took account of the fact that the divine stone kept the world tree alive and supplied hundreds of billions of Elvenheims, then even half of a fragment of a divine stone which had been split into 5s was still a formidable amount. And another thing. A small cross symbol which had appeared on Hansu's head as soon as he gathered all 5 relics. It was a sign of the which had the rights to the powers on the world tree along with the king. Hansu loosened up after receiving countless amounts of information that poured in through the world tree. Since the huge amounts of information that felt like they were splitting his head was too burdensome. Unlike an Elvenheim, there was a limit for him to use all the powers of an administrator as a human. And even more so if the world tree's status wasn't normal. But this is still a great help. He had gained the power of an administrator and 5 relics. He had geared up quite a bit. But Ouroboros, who still had a divine stone fragment and could play around with its giant body, was still dangerous. Though he wanted to just smash its head or heart, and his original plan was approaching it from the inside and ripping out the divine stone fragment and destroying the heart, but though the invasion from within was blocked off. Getting through its thoracic bones or its skull, which was hundreds of meters in thickness, and killing it like that was impossible. Plan around its weakness. Its weakness was its spine that was on its back. Unlike the intestines deep within, the spine on its back protruded out here and there. He needed to cut the nerves in between every spine, which was the size of a small hill, and seal its movements. The poison should be spreading throughout its body. The thing that was spreading throughout his body was a neurotoxin. Which meant that he just needed to blow up the heart and kill it off. I need to aim for when it drops its guard. There's a reason why it was always focused on drinking the toxic waters from the start. Why did it need to care about other things, and it had no natural predator? And because of this it wouldn't react to most things. He needed to utilize the time when it wasn't on guard and cut off its nerves in a single sweep. The people who have the ability to get through the scales and cut off the thick nerves in an instant are only the 7 departed souls. The rest were not at the level where they can even get through the scale of the Ouroboros. Which meant that while the people below were distracting the parasites, him and the 7 departed souls had to attack together, cut off 8 nerves and then dodge the thrashing Ouroboros to cut off 4 more. Because of this the 7 departed souls had to do their part very well. Continue as soon as the injury from the battle with the Akuma heals. Anyways, they should be planning something out by now. Miyamoto's first goal was getting out of this place. Hansu, who had been looking at the 5 relics floating around him, looked at Miyamoto, who was suddenly approaching him with a strange expression. Are the preparations going well? What's the problem? Miyamoto laughed as he spoke. Why do I need a problem to come see you when we are going to be fighting together from now on? I just came to take a stroll for a bit. We should go outside for a bit and have a look at the Ouroboros. I know a location with a good scene. Hansu nodded at those words. Then let's. I also have something to tell you. The two of them then left the large area where the Akuma was. Chapter 86. Ouroboros, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Hansu made a surprised expression at Miyamoto, who was standing next to a tree. A lot of skills. And high mastery levels. He was quite formidable for rolling around the ground for 20 years. And it seemed like he was quite talented as well. If he had chosen to go up instead of staying here, then he would have gotten quite famous. Miyamoto looked at that Hansu and then spoke. Are you really going to fight with that thing? For what? The reward. Miyamoto then looked at the Ouroboros that was wrapped around the giant world tree's trunk. A phenomenal size. If one said that they weren't afraid after looking at that thing which seemed like it depicted a beast from a myth, then they would probably be lying. Hansu gazed at that Miyamoto and then spoke out. You can say it honestly. That you don't want to fight. Dot. Miyamoto's eyes danced about at Hansu's direct words. What is he thinking? Why did he suddenly say this to him? Miyamoto was shocked at the sudden words of Hansu, but he just shrugged his shoulders and spoke. What are you talking about? I said I'll fight with you. And when he was just about to add some extra words, a chaotic noise was heard from before. Miyamoto squinted his eyes as he looked at the origin of the sound. Though they were quite a distance away from the world tree, it wasn't hard for Hansu to know at his level. It started. Miyamoto looked at the fight in the distance and then spoke towards Hansu casually. It seems like a fight broke out. It could only be so when they tried to gather a large amount of people in such a short amount of time. Miyamoto looked at Hansu's reactions while he spoke. If there was a meaning to the hostages, then it would be simple. He just needed to take the hostages and cross the lake. Then Hansu wouldn't be able to do anything then. But if the hostages had no meaning, then it would become a little bit troublesome. Since he would then need to look for an opening while fighting with the Ouroboros. Of course the former was much more comfortable. Since the latter meant that he would need to fight with the Ouroboros. Let's see. Miyamoto looked at Hansu, who seemed to have gotten interested in the fight in the distance. Hansu compared the two sides. Though it was quite a distance away, it wasn't something that Hansu, whose ability was amplified by the relics and could utilize the powers of the world tree to a degree, could not see. After looking around for a bit, both sides had quite an amount of familiar faces. One side had Mihi and Sangjin. The other side was familiar because of a different reason. Dark Mad Lord. Hansu clicked his tongue. Since he knew what had happened. They revived him with the cross huh. But Hansu shook his head. Since that wasn't the important part. There are too many familiar faces. Everyone who he had known once upon a time had gathered. It didn't make any sense for all those guys to meet by a chance. And they were all in life-endangering situations. Some bastard collected them huh. It seems like they'll all die if I don't do anything. The attacking side was also attacking while throwing their lives on the line. It seems like they were going to take in hostages and make him take care of the parasites. They were trying in order to find his weakness, but there were too many people who could be suspects. It could be Miyamoto behind him, one of the 6 pillars, or even one of the 12 roots. People who had the ability to go through the mirror at this moment but could not because of himself. People who wanted to at least save their own body. Hansu sighed inwardly. It's quite a chaotic situation. He was the only person who wanted to kill the Ouroboros. The others were trying their best in order to find a hole they can escape through. They're probably doing so because they think that they can escape. It seemed like him having closed off the exit with the parasites didn't quite seem closed off to them. They were now coming out too directly. They think that that'll be that if they didn't get caught, but it wasn't like that in Hansu's situation. I do understand. The only people who lived were those at the purple zone. Since everyone weaker than that had been wiped off. So even if these people went up from here, they could only live for about 5 more years. But he understood their actions since they didn't know those facts. And they might still try to escape even if they knew. They might die right away in the fight against the Ouroboros and the parasites, but if they escaped, then they might be able to live another 3 or 4 more years. About 1 billion people here would die off, but what did that matter in their perspective? But this is it. He hadn't entirely closed the mirror just in case he also failed. Since he wouldn't be able to open the dimensional door until he completely recovers the world tree. And he thought that would be enough, but apparently not for the others. They were constantly trying to grasp a hold of his ankles. There's nothing I can do since you and I think differently. If those guys and Miyamoto actually do succeed in escaping, then even he wouldn't be able to kill the Ouroboros. They could only clash since their goals were different. Hansu started to organize the 5 relics around his body. Keying. The mana code within the relic started to move onto Hansu. The cross which symbolized the administrator on Hansu's forehead started to shine. Hansu then put his hand on the world tree and then spoke to Miyamoto. Miyamoto. Could you send a message to the others? What? There won't be a solution if we don't kill other things other than the Ouroboros at this time. What are you trying to do? Miyamoto spoke with uneasiness while looking at the cross symbol shining on Hansu's forehead. Hansu smiled as he heard Miyamoto's answer and spoke. Just because. I feel as if there's a need for us to become closer. Hansu finished his thoughts and then sent an order down the world tree. The mana code which flared down the world tree reached a very deep location beneath the lake. The location where the mana which turned the lake into the dimensional portal once a month gathered. And soon the mana within that place shattered as it dispersed. Now that mirror wouldn't be able to turn into the mirror. Not until the world tree was completely recovered. But this isn't enough. Why would they believe him if he just said that the door was closed? There was a need for the people to realize it a bit more clearly. The current situation, that is. Hansu sent down an extra order. And soon a change occurred. They fight well. He had thought that these guys would get swept off in an instant, but they were holding on quite well. Jukma made an amused expression as he looked at the newcomers fighting valiantly in the distance. Watching a fight was always interesting, but the best thing out of those was watching newbies fighting each other. These fights seemed rather cute after the battle he had seen between Hansu and the strange demonic thing. There's a few that stand out even there. Shall I try to rope them in if they survive? Jukma checked out a few people. It didn't matter what they had. They could just give things to them. The important part was how much of the thing they had could they push out to the limit and use. That was talent. There probably isn't anyone like Hansu, but there's nothing bad about roping them in. There wasn't a need for all of them to die. Since the important thing was checking to see if Hansu reacted in times of danger. Kogugugugu, what is it? Jukma, who had been looking at Miyamoto and Hansu's reactions up above, frowned at the sudden vibration. Is the Ouroboros moving? That was the only possibility for a vibration of this level. Jukma quickly looked at the middle of the lake where the tail of the Ouroboros was stuck onto. He then doubted his senses that he had never done before until now. Since a scene that definitely could not happen was happening. Chururuk, the volume of the lake was viciously decreasing. The bottom of the lake, which was filled with parasites, cracked apart as the waters that filled up the lake drained out. The parasites were shocked at the ground suddenly getting cracked and were dodging here and there. There was only one thing that came up in this head. What just happened? Many thoughts clashed with each other in Jukma's head. Why did this suddenly happen? Could we still get out even if the lake dried out? The tunnel might open in a different way. But the worst situation slowly started to get drawn up in Jukma's head. And a red carrier pigeon flew towards that Jukma. Miyamoto's carrier pigeon. The red carrier pigeon, which was usually laid back as if it was depicting Miyamoto's psyche, rushed towards them. No, it didn't only come to Jukma. The red carrier pigeons were flying towards the other 5 pillars and 12 roots in the distance as well. He would have applauded Miyamoto's ability to control the red carrier pigeon, which was harder to handle than the blue ones, but the message within the carrier pigeon filled his head with rage instantly. This crazy bastard. They're coming. Hansu saw the enraged clansman flying towards him from afar and moved his head. And below Hansu's feet, Miyamoto was holding onto his stomach and gasping for air. Koha! What have you done? A monkey would have known as well. As for why the lake below had dried out, they realized another thing at the same time. That all the safe escape routes had disappeared now. Miyamoto's sanity froze up at that moment. He didn't worry that much despite the exit being closed up with the parasites. Others might not be able to get out, but he thought that he would at least be able to get out. But the story changed if this happened. He really needed to fight with this life on the line. Miyamoto, whose fort which he had guarded for 20 years had fallen down, couldn't maintain his mask anymore and then charged towards Hansu. And this was the result. Well. He probably thought that there wasn't a need to maintain it anymore too. Hansu mumbled as he looked at Miyamoto. If he didn't have the relics then he wouldn't be able to beat Miyamoto. Nirmaha's ring, demonic dragon's reinforcement and 1,000 army soldiers were amazing artifacts, but there was a limit to closing the 20-year gap with those things. The problem was that he had the relics. While Hansu was looking at Miyamoto, who had charged at him and had gotten beaten up, hundreds of clansmen had flown into his location. Everyone were important people from the 6 pillars and the 12 roots. The clansmen who had rushed up with rage, flinched as they saw Miyamoto laid out on the ground. Since there wasn't anyone who didn't know the face of the 7 departed souls who had acted as the king in this place for 20 years. Miyamoto, who stumbled up, looked at Hansu and shouted. "You crazy bastard! What are you thinking? You! Don't you know that you'll get stabbed in the back if you act like a tyrant?" No matter how strong they were, it was better to make as least amount of enemies as they can. People who were pushed down under from strength will always look for opportunities. He didn't know what would happen from now on no matter how strong he was, but for him to come out like this. Hansu made an amused expression as he spoke. "You can calculate that after we finish. The important thing is that now you guys need me in order to live and go up from here. It's a win-win since I need you too, right? And I don't know who of the 18 friends it is, but you should stop the thing going on below. It's a nuisance." This was the Maginot Line star. It was better to use a different method if they continue to grab onto his ankles. Even if he were to organize the people in front of them. I should visit Sangjin. While Hansu was thinking of these things, Miyamoto grinded his teeth inwardly. That relic. If only I can take those relics. Then that guy wouldn't even be his opponent. No, he might even be able to revive the dimensional door. Miyamoto stared at the 5 blindingly bright relics shining around Hansu's body. Translator's note to those who don't know much about history, or not really about WW2 in general, the Maginot Line is https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Maginot_line. I decided to just give you a wiki page since I was too lazy to search things up and wanted to use this precious time to TL more for you peeps. Red heart. TLDR, click link if you don't know what Maginot Line is. Chapter 87. Ouroboros, free, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Jubuk, it's been a while. Sangjin, who was treating his wounds because of the battle he had during the day, flinched at the sudden voice which came from behind. A voice which familiar and caused his mind to become chaotic recently. It's been a while. Hansu. Sangjin turned around and then spoke. He had heard the voice after a very long time, but a burdensome mind came up instead of a welcoming mind. He wasn't curious as to how he had gotten to this place. Since he probably came in with a method that he couldn't even fathom. The gap between him and Hansu had been increased that much. Have you been well? Sangjin shook his head at Hansu's words and then spoke. There's something I want to ask. Do you really need me? He knew that Hansu needed him. But it wasn't him that he needed, but rather somebody who fit his role. He could be replaced with anybody at any time. To stronger and more talented people. He could even take one of the 7 departed souls. Hansu shook his head at those words. Strength wasn't the important part. Since he could just give that to him. What he needed was somebody he could trust. I came here because of that. Sangjin squinted his eyes. Hansu looked at that Sangjin and spoke. It didn't matter if your mind changed up until this point and left. Since it's quite a burdensome job. There was a few things I've given you, but it can't even be compared to the thing you have done for me. I thank you for that. This person was somebody who would help Hansu's work. He had to be thankful. Since it wasn't easy to clean up somebody's behind in a world where it was hard to even take care of themselves no matter how much strength they gave them. Hansu continued to speak. But the things I will give you from now on are different. If you take these things and change your mind then, I will need to chase you down no matter where you go and retrieve these things. Retrieve. He didn't know whether if the things Hansu will give him were skills or artifacts. But by the way he talked, the method of retrieval was probably set already. This is the crossroad. I will respect your choice. Sangjin gulped while looking at Hansu's eyes that was turning heavier. Goo! A few people were climbing up the world tree that the Ouroboros coiled around. Exactly 8. Hansu and the 7 departed souls quickly headed towards the set location. Carefully, since the parasites might disturb them from cutting up the nerves if they find out. Thankfully those guys were distracted from the swarming food below, so they weren't paying much attention to them. Hansu touched the small earring on his ear and shook his head. He should have given it to me much earlier if he had something like this. An earring which had the skill that allowed one to send blue and red carrier pigeons saved within. It wasn't an object that was easy to acquire, but of course the 6 pillars would have something like this. They, who didn't give it to him before the mirror was closed off, handed over the earring to Hansu after their escape routes were blocked off. They're asking me to fight more fervently, huh? Hansu, who had concluded his thoughts of the 6 pillars below, spoke towards Miyamoto, who was climbing the world tree's wall next to him. Don't make such an expression. Hansu looked at Miyamoto next to him, who had an extremely dissatisfied expression as he spoke. Miyamoto's expression didn't change as he spoke. How could you say such things when you forcibly pushed me into a fight? As if he gave up on maintaining his mask, Miyamoto replied bluntly. Since he understood that he had to fight no matter what after this had happened. Damn it. I charged in without thinking. His true self could not hold on to his rage and had shown itself. No, he might have known already. The words Hansu had told him before. Asking if he didn't want to fight. He had exploded from Hansu's attitude, which told him that he knew something in having his escape route blocked off. Since the fact that he was playing around on his hand enraged him so much. But he didn't give up. Yeah. Since this had happened already. He just wanted to open the dimensional door at the beginning, but this thought slowly changed. If he were to go up with that strength, then he will become a huge help in the upper zones. And because of this he needed the relics. And this battle with the Ouroboros might become that change. I should also take care of those things other than the relics before I go up. A secret that nobody knew except him. Oh, those guys are exempt. Miyamoto then thought of the conversation he had with the owners of the other pillars. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't block this place by himself. And Miyamoto hated this as well. He couldn't be stuck here forever. So he needed people who were useful enough to fit his role while he was gone. Those who could maintain the Akuma's seal. And he also needed things to make those guys useful. Everyone including Iris nodded. They had seen newcomers coming in every year while roaming around the World Tree Mountain Range. And seen the numbers steadily rising. They needed to faithfully maintain the Akuma's seal for those people and their possible family who might come mixed in with those people. But they didn't just go over this. The first patriarch of the Triple Lights Union, Pao Ren. His trait was. A promise would be made when both sides agree. Then both sides had to keep that promise. The penalties would differ depending on the level. If the levels were harsh, then the side which broke the promise might even lose their life. A trait which could only be used if one had absolute faith in their strength. If they were weaker than the enemy, then this trait would instead become poison. Damn it. If I break it, then I'll just die. He knew without even seeing it. A formless chain which tied down his heart. It might have been different in the past, but his heart will get crushed if he broke the promise now. The promise back then were 2 things. A welcoming noise on Miyamoto's terms. There was no reason to disagree. Since his current goal was peace and not growth. Though a situation which I can't handle anymore had occurred. Damn it. And second. Of course it didn't matter. Dumbass. That guy had probably set up such limitations in order to maintain the balance and to keep him from taking those things and becoming a king of the red zone and messing it up. Since the things that guy had left behind were that mighty. Why would they leave behind weak items when his job was protecting their family? But they didn't know that he had another trait. A trait which he had hidden from everyone. He could transfer memories, information, skills, traits, and battle experience as much as the user wanted to other people. To a maximum of 7 people. This was why the other 6 departed souls could use high-level skills that were hard to obtain freely. Since the other 6 could use them if he had them. It was many times more efficient even at a glance. And another thing that I never told anyone. A secret which he hadn't told the 6 departed souls. If the difference in levels is quite large, then he would be able to even control them. Where could someone eat a free meal in this world? The 6 departed souls received high-level battle abilities from Miyamoto's soul fragment, but he could somewhat control their bodies with the trait he had if he wanted. So they were called 7 departed souls as a bundle, but there was a clear difference between Miyamoto and the other 6. Since the other 6 were slaves if Miyamoto was the owner. Miyamoto brought in the people who seemed quite talented with the fragments of 7 souls and raised them with the skill runes or artifacts that Ares, Chaldean, Pauran or Kongte had left behind. To the point where they can control the Akuma's seal but couldn't resist his own control. If they get to the point where they can deny his control, then that alone will be a threat to them. Miyamoto, who followed the idea of safety first, could not stand having a single hint of threat. And another thing. The skills and artifacts that may become a threat to him that the owners of the pillars had left behind were all given to one person and hidden. To the person who had received the final fragment. I didn't break the promise. He didn't use them. And he had given them to the people who were helping him maintain the seal. Except he had just turned them to the point where they won't be a threat to him. At first he had thought that he could control them, so he tried to raise them with the soul fragment. If they steadily grew up, then they would have reached a level where they'll be able to deny his control. If he couldn't use it, then others couldn't use it as well. Miyamoto, who had organized his thoughts, looked at Hansu and bluntly spoke out. Let's start. Don't drag it out. I want to finish this damnable job as quick as possible. They needed to quickly start in order to quickly finish. There's no need for me to take the risk. In a bad case he would look for a chance even by calling the other departed souls and using them as suicide soldiers with this second trait. Since something like that was possible even if controlling them for a long time was hard. Hansu stared at that Miyamoto and then spoke out. Let's go out. Follow the plan. They would cut out the nerves from 1st to 4th and from 9th to 12th. Then they would regroup between the 5th and the 8th vertebrae and prepare for battle. Even if they cut it, the area around the cut nerve would not freeze up. It would only become slow and weaker. But if one accounted for its huge body, then that was still threatening. Soon everyone dispersed as they started to fall towards the body of the Ouroboros at an extreme speed. Kugagagugagu, a bright beam of light rose up from the top of the Ouroboros in the distance. From 8 locations at the same time. Kuwang. At the same time the world tree shook while making crushing noises. To be exact, it wasn't the world tree but the Ouroboros which coiled around the world tree tightened its bind. It probably just felt like being poked with a needle with its size, but getting poked by a needle would still hurt. It even pulled out its head that was drinking the toxic waters from the pain it had not felt in a really long time as it started to twist around its body. Damn it. Evacuate in between the world tree roots. Evacuate. Wake. Parasites are falling down from the sky. As the Ouroboros shook his body, the parasites were falling from the sky like rain. They had made the area of battle smaller and lead the battle, but that was now impossible. No, they would just get shredded apart if they were to even get touched by the tail of the Ouroboros while maintain the formation. It was now individual fights. They had to now hide in between the roots and fight the parasites. Jukma grinded his teeth as he saw this. Damn it. This is the start. He had thought of a way to escape no matter what until now, but that was now impossible. And he was enraged even more at that. At the current situation that was being shaken back and forth by a single person. And he had to pretend to feel happy and supportive of Hansu's actions. This is really frustrating. Jukma pondered for a moment. Hansu had told him to stop his work, so he had stopped. But he did that because he cared about these guys somewhat. I should go vent out my anger. All his surroundings had gotten chaotic from the parasites and the Ouroboros. Basically a cataclysm. Which means this was the perfect time to land a blow on him. It wasn't weird for a few people to die off in a chaotic situation like this. There's no reason for evidence to be left behind either. Let's see your expression after this all ends. Jukma laughed coldly as he started to send messages towards a location. Sangjin drooled as he arrived at the destination deep within the world tree. How did he find such a place like this? In this destination there were treasures that Hansu had spoken of. Rare artifacts and amazing skill runes that anybody could tell were rare from a single glance. And Sangjin slightly frowned at the female who had those things equipped on her. Who did such a thing? An unconscious female who had 3 limbs cut off and was barely being kept alive with a tube with nutritional fluids stuck in her mouth. Sangjin gulped at the sight of the female who had extremely fancy artifacts on her body and had numerous skill runes on her single arm left, which made her look even more pitiful. Proofreader's note: regular chapter 1/3. We are looking for a proofreader for a new Gosi, Oding, project, with already 10 chapters translated. Kind of similar to the other 2 Gosi, Okaying, and Gosi, Rhyme, projects, except the MC didn't go back in time. If you sent a mail long ago to be a PR, don't hesitate to reapply, as the number of PR is limited by the number of series translated. You can see the requirements/contact on the recruitment page. Slightly smiling face. Chapter 88. Ouroboros, 4, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Hansu started to pull out the energy from within his body atop of the giant scales. The scales beneath his feet were clashing around like waves as they smashed Hansu's ankles like blades. Damn it. Faster. Hansu, who had withstood the Ouroboros' attacks with the formless armor of the relic and the 1,000 soldiers' armor, clenched his teeth and then smashed down towards the scale beneath his feet with huge amounts of energy. Boom. The attack Hansu let out smashed apart the scales and then ruthlessly ripped apart the inner flesh. Chiik, the nerve which had appeared between its spines, was the size of a large lake, but it could not handle the powerful energy Hansu was letting out. As the giant nerve started to burn up, it started to smash its body towards the world tree as if it was getting enraged. In order to smash the bugs on its body. Boom. As its body smashed onto the world tree, a force which felt like a meteor smashed onto its body. Cool. The parasites on its body started to madly fall down onto the ground. The force which was smashing his whole body made him think of the already made decision. Should I have taken them instead? Hansu then thought of the things that Sangjin had probably eaten by now. The others didn't know, but Hansu knew that Miyamoto had the fragments of 7 souls as a trait. Since the trait's victim, Sophia Vardra, told him after she came up. Sophia Vardra. One of the 7 departed souls. And the person who had found the last hidden person in despair. Sophia found Miyamoto's treasure vault and then figured out everything. She then killed the lady who mustered up a small amount of remaining strength to beg her to kill her, took everything, smashed apart the control of Miyamoto and climbed up. Gangtae, who had heard this story, grinded his teeth as he spoke. He knew of the location of Miyamoto's treasure vault because of this. Objects that the strong people who had the ability to raise the 6 pillars left behind while asking him to protect their family. and objects that Miyamoto had considered the most dangerous and had hidden away separately. Of course their worth was amazing. Since it had risen Sophia, who was talented but late, all the way up into the final brigade. Objects that were hard to get even up above since they were growing ones. And one of them was very outstanding out of these items. Conte surprisingly obtained a solo numbering skill while roaming around the tutorial and the red zone. Hansu, who was thinking of that skill, looked in between the roots which had turned into chaos. Hung Keel Ross, one of the clansmen of Harem, thought of the orders he had received. The work itself was easy. Since 15 tracking teams had been sent out in order to kill off a few newcomers. But the environment was the problem. Damn it. What am I doing when keeping my own life is hard enough? Keel, who was searching for the targets on his own, frowned as he saw the parasites falling from the sky. This won't do. I should at least have some fun when I find them instead of just killing them off. Apparently the Asian girl called Mihi was famous for being pretty. If they were a newcomer, then the special toxicity of the otherworld shouldn't have seeped in yet either. It will be fun playing around with her. He found his target in the distance after running for a bit. He then showed a conspicuous color. Ha! Did no one really find them yet? This wasn't his area, so he thought that others had already found them and were enjoying them. But the girl called Mihi was still running around the battlefield with a small group of people in order to find a way to live. My luck is really good. Right as Keel laughed and was about to run over, he felt a chill run down his back. For years since he had entered the otherworld, Keel knew, even without having a skill, that if he ignored this feeling then he will lose his neck. Keel then froze his expression as he looked at the location where the aura came from and not at Mihi. He then laughed. Gosh! Did my perception rust quite a bit? He knew that fool over there quite well. Since that guy was part of his targets this time. Was he called Sangjin? The guy who had a ragged cape around his body was glaring at him with a cold expression. Keel, who had gotten so annoyed to the point where he didn't even want to open his mouth, pulled out a short sword, bit his pinky to let out some blood and then started to write a character out. He then threw it toward Sangjin. The blood on the dagger drew out a strange symbol in the air. The moment the strange dagger landed in front of Sangjin, a 2 m wide black sphere appeared with Sangjin as the center. It then compressed everything into a small dot. Kushushashuk. Keel made a satisfied expression at the area which had been destroyed. This is it. But Keel frowned. Since something had flown over through the dust. And Keel's alertness exploded as soon as he saw Sangjin. He could only do so. Everybody could only get cautious once they saw the artifact strung around his body. And even more so if they wouldn't even get scratched by his. God damn it. Keel urgently poured out skills as he backed off, but he could not dodge at all as the tip of Sangjin's long sword cut him. Damn it. Where did this guy gain such artifacts? Anyways, I need to prepare for more attacks. While Keel got flustered and prepared himself for his next set of attacks, he looked at Sangjin, who wasn't chasing him anymore, and then made a confused expression. Why didn't he charge and attack him? So scrubs can only do so much, huh? Keel laughed coldly. He should have tried to get as much out of the surprise attack he had achieved, but it seems that he didn't from fear. Keel, who was landing while laughing, had his view tilting as he fell over. To be precise, not the view but himself was falling sideways. Ah! Ahu! Keel, who had freaked out and then checked his body, made an expression of disbelief at this right leg which had rotted and was shriveling up. No way! It just barely scratched it. He then fell into despair at the purple mana reinforcement that was eating into his body. He then realized it. Why he had found the Mihi girl first. It wasn't that he had found her first. The people before him had met the same fate. Damn it. Kyle closed his eyes while looking at the sword flying towards his neck. To leave behind such a thing. Hansu mumbled as he thought of the skill Conte had left behind. Actually, Miyamoto's rewards were a bit awkward for him, since they didn't have much meaning to him who was using the relics. And the skills were very high quality but not quite good enough for him who could only fill up 7. But one thing, that thing was different. A solo numbering skill which allowed one to raise the people whom they had killed as specters during the night and use the skill during the day. The solo numbering was something that was determined after it had grown to the purple stage. So Kongte wouldn't have known how good of a skill it would be at the red zone level. No, he had actually gained other artifacts and skills so easily, so he felt that better skills than this would come out, so he had just left behind the worst of the useful ones he had. A skill which was created entirely from luck which couldn't be laughed at. This skill was something that even he could not ignore. But Hansu shook his head. This isn't something I will use. It wasn't suitable for him to use because of its burden to use against humans. No, in order to use this properly then they had to raise the people whom they had killed in large numbers. Since the true might of this strength was shown at night. If they could raise the dead during the day then the skills ranking would have went up even more. Anyways, they will be walking around and advertising that they were human killers. It'll be chaotic. And because of this, in the case he retrieved this he would need to give it to Enbai Aaron who he was going to recruit as a punisher in the orange zone or to somebody else. Since the main goal of this place was the 5 calamities and since there was a higher chance of clashing with people up above. But he had gained a punisher that was not part of his plan and he was doing quite well, so it was better to use it now and raise him. If I raise him well starting from now then he'll be better than Enbai Aaron. Anyways, I should do what I need to do. Keying the powerful energy in Hanso's hand dug down into the nerve. Like a giant lake evaporating from powerful flames, the mana wave that came out of Hanso's hand melted down the nerves. Kudududuk, it's done. As the first nerve that he had taken responsibility of melted down, Hansu quickly launched a red carrier pigeon that signaled him having completed his objective. Pudududuk, one carrier pigeon after another started to flow up from kilometers ahead. Which meant that everyone had completed their objectives. Good. It was now way more dangerous. Since they had to cross over the body of the Ouroboros which was raving crazily and burn down the final 4 nerves. Boom. Hansu looked at the giant body which was thrashing around as he hid between the scales. A force which felt like being hit by a giant race of the abyss hit Hansu's body. It would have been dangerous if he hadn't hidden quickly. As I expected. The force is the greatest since it's the most dangerous place. If they hadn't burned down the 8 nerves at the same time then it would have been faster and more dangerous than this. A much slower but still extremely formidable strength and speed. Quickly. We must burn down the remaining 4. He wanted to dig into the inside but it would take a long time for him to get through the harder inner scale and the hundreds of meters of thick muscle. The world tree might even get destroyed by the thrashing Ouroboros. Never. Hansu clenched his teeth and then dodged the scales which stood up in order to chop him apart as he started to quickly run in between those things. Hook. Hook. Sophia, who had barely managed to burn down the nerve, clenched her teeth. She had been sent to the safest location because she was the youngest. If Hanso's location was the end of the whip, the fastest part, then the location she was at was the start of the whip, the slowest part. But her whole body still felt like it was getting smashed apart from the Ouroboros which was thrashing about. I need to borrow strength. Sophia used the soul fragment that Miyamoto had given her that she rarely used because of her pride. Keying suddenly 8 different protective skills surrounded her body. Sophia, who had checked her body which had gotten rather safe, thought of Hansu in the distance as she make a bittersweet expression. Damn it. I would have gotten stronger if I went up too. I shouldn't have gotten entangled with Miyamoto back then. The one thing Sophia counted as both her strong and weak point. She was extremely competitive. She directly accepted Miyamoto's offer at the single word that she was able to get stronger, but then as if the world was proving nothing was free, it became harder for her to go against Miyamoto's saying. She managed to live with the pride that there was nobody who became as strong as her in 3 years, but the newly appeared Hansu lit the fire in her mind again. I can get stronger. But Sophia shook her head and then threw away these thoughts. This wasn't the time to focus on such things. They needed to kill the Ouroboros quickly. Since she also wanted the least amount of people to die. She wasn't dumb to the point where she would lose sight of her goals after getting swept up by her competitiveness. Sophia clenched her teeth and then pushed the skills of the soul fragment Miyamoto had given her as she started to run. The fragment of the soul slowly started to take over Sophia's body. Proofreaders note this is a sponsored chapter. So the thing to remember is that the reward Hansu would have gotten from killing the calamity fish is something that Kongte had randomly obtained and considered the worst of his useful skills. Damn Kongte. Chapter 89. Ouroboros, 5, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Hansu frowned while looking at the thrashing Ouroboros. Yuduk. Yudududuk. As it thrashed around, the outer shell layer of the world tree's pillar area was being broken off without stopping. Hansu clenched his teeth as he saw the fragments dropping down like meteors. I need to plan things out quickly. Hansu stabilized his breath as he saw the 7 departed souls flying in from the distance. The plan of pairing up to take down 4 of the nerves wouldn't work anymore. Since the body's thrashing had gotten quite aggressive as well as the outer and inner scales were gathering up above the nerves like waves. The 8 of them needed to gather, block the blade-like scale waves from all around and at the same time combine their strength to burn down the nerve in one go and then continue to the next one. Boom! Hansu, who had thrown out Ekadrang's relic, the 7-star marbles, in all directions in order to create footholds for the 7 departed souls, started to crazily assault the scales charging towards them. And the 7 departed souls flew in at an extreme speed around Hansu. Boom! Miyamoto, who had used a skill to deflect the blade-like scale waves, checked over Hansu who was crazily smashing down at the scales in the distance. Not only Hansu but the other departed souls were faithfully burning off the scales on the back of the Ouroboros and at the same time gnawing down on the nerves. Catch their body on the marbles if the thrashing of the Ouroboros got intense and then go back down to attack, repeat process. Miyamoto mumbled inwardly. He's amazing. They were throwing down attacks hundreds of meters apart from each other. They had no leisure to look after each other since they were already busy enough dodging the storm-like attacks of the Ouroboros. But that guy was constantly resupplying the marbles and relics and helping them fight. He was accomplishing a feat which was impossible without having the movements of all 7 departed souls who were hundreds of meters apart and the whip-like Ouroboros within his head and dissecting it. They had already destroyed 2 nerves and were in the process of destroying the 3rd. If they smash this down then only 1 will remain. Somebody else watching this might think that it's going well but Miyamoto's expression wasn't that good. Damn it. Miyamoto's plan was simple. While Hansu was busy fighting against the Ouroboros, use Sophia, who was the weakest and easiest member to control, to attack. It was easier to catch Hansu off guard since she had known him longer in comparison to the other departed souls. Make him unable to battle, take the relics and then run away after opening the dimensional portal. But Miyamoto's plan wasn't really working out very well. Why are there no open spots being created? He knew that Hansu had his guard up against him and because of this Miyamoto was attacking the nerve from as far away as possible from Hansu. So Hansu would feel at ease. At a distance where Hansu wouldn't feel threatened even if he were to launch a sneak attack. It wasn't that hard since the nerve itself was so big. But Hansu was constantly checking on Sophia and the other 6 departed souls and moving around. An open spot wasn't being created despite him smashing apart the giant scales and utilizing a huge amount of energy. Miyamoto clenched his teeth. At this rate they'll be able to kill the Ouroboros and he'll lose the chance to obtain the relic. Of course somebody could ask something like this. But Miyamoto knew that the army of the 5th calamity, located at the top side of the pillar, existed. Which meant that this wasn't the end. That bastard would probably want to kill that thing too. And he felt a huge amount of greed towards those relics. A production of a small sun. Like amount of mana. He would be able to act like a king in the next stage with those things. If there aren't chances, I just need to make them. He was strangely keeping an eye on Sophia more. He didn't know whether it was love, interest, or just curiosity. They hadn't seen each other long enough for such things to bud. Well, she is a bit pretty. It didn't matter which one of those above things it was. The important part was that he was keeping an eye on it. That was enough. And according to the intel Jukma gave him, he took care of people that he fought with. Miyamoto started to focus on the soul fragment. Sophia caught her breath on top of the floating marbles and looked at Hansu fighting in the distance. He's strangely paying more attention to me. His actions proved it even without words. She could tell just from the precise controls of the marbles he had given to her. That he was paying more attention to her. At first her pride plummeted because she had thought that he was doing this because she was weaker than the other 6, but after observing for a while it seems like that wasn't the case. Since the movements of the marbles told her that he had complete trust of her. It feels weird. Sophia, who had making a confused expression, shook off her thoughts and then started to focus. Since she could just ask things she was curious about after. Sway Sophia, who was focusing in order to use her skill which she had the most pride in, was greatly shocked when suddenly her body refused to listen to her orders. A feeling of her whole body's controls getting taken over. She quickly looked at the other people just in case it was an attack from the Ouroboros, but they didn't have anything wrong with them. God damn it. What is this? She tried her best in order to control herself, but even her consciousness was fading as if it was making fun of that effort. At that time the giant body of the Ouroboros flew in like a giant's arm towards Sophia. Cool. God damn it, the marbles tried to get away with her body but it was fruitless. Since the marbles were at most a help to her movements. If Sophia didn't move herself then she wouldn't be able to get out of the attack range with just her body. I'm dying in such a vein. I wonder if there won't be pain. Sophia closed her eyes after mumbling in her almost disappeared conscious. And in the final sight of Sophia, somebody rushing towards her could be seen. This guy. To go this far. It'll be trouble if she dies. Hansu grinded his teeth while rushing towards the falling Sophia in the distance. Then he started to ponder. Shall I clean it up? Killing the Ouroboros was now possible even without Miyamoto. And Miyamoto's hostility towards him was beyond his expectations. This lame bastard. You got rotten after 20 years of peace. He never expected that this guy would act like such a coward. A person who had been acting like a king of the red zone for 20 years. And the skills to match that. He had thought that Miyamoto would show a look befitting that, and in fact didn't gain much harm from fighting the Ouroboros, but for him to go this far. Hanso's expression turned cold. Clean it up. At this rate it was more of a disturbance than help. But he had to save Sophia first. Hansu stepped off the marbles at an extreme speed and then caught Sophia. He then hugged her and then raised his mana reinforcement to the limit. It's too late to dodge. And the giant body of the Ouroboros smashed into them like a whip. Boom. Kohuk. Hansu clenched his teeth at the force which made his whole body feel like it was getting smashed. Hanso's body, which had been hit like a baseball being hit by a bat, started to rush towards the ground at an extreme speed. Hung Ekadrang's marble rushed towards Hansu very quickly. Kijigajik Hansu used those marbles to reduce his speed in air and tried to catch his balance in air. Since he will receive even more damage if he were to crash onto the ground like this. At that moment the unconscious Sophia opened her eyes in Hansu's embrace. And then laughed while looking at Hansu hugging him. With a completely different eye than before. Keying Sophia started up the again under Miyamoto's orders. Gullible bastard. It might be different from afar, but if she were to attack from this distance then it'll end just like that. And even more so if he had been hit by the Ouroboros. But the moment Miyamoto tried to laugh with Sophia's face, a hand grasped Sophia's wrist. Keying, and because of this the jade-colored marble that was being made inside Sophia's hand disappeared before it could even activate. Miyamoto, who was controlling Sophia from the distance, spat out a sound unconsciously at the sudden unexpected event. UK. Miyamoto quickly tried to look at Hansu, but the sight of Sophia he was controlling started to quickly fade away. What? What just happened? Miyamoto made a flustered face after being disconnected. At the same time a chill ran down his back. No way. The reason why he had acted so drastically was in large part because he wasn't worried about getting caught. Since he could just blame it on Sophia. How would Hansu know that it was his doing? But the danger he felt run down his back told him. There was no way that a threatening feeling from the Ouroboros would come at this time. I've been caught. He didn't know how he found out or what the evidence was. But the important fact was that Hansu was now targeting him. Damn it. What do I do? What do I do? It felt like Hansu would come rushing up from below at any moment. He thought of controlling the other 5 departed souls and having a go at it, but then he would need to get in danger. Miyamoto made his decision in a short moment. Run away. Then look for a chance from the distance. There's no way that this crazy guy will slash down the sinless 6 departed souls. He just needed to hide deep within the world tree and then wait until everything finishes. If he were to hide in this vast world tree mountain range, then how would that guy find him? If that guy was planning to kill the Wasp Legion, then he would be able to look for another chance with the departed souls. Damn it. This is miserable. But Miyamoto's theory was the same as always. The one surviving is the stronger one. Miyamoto pulled out his final card, the feather. Not a fragment but a whole leaf. He would be able to go anywhere with this. Crumple. Soon Miyamoto's body got covered with a bright light and started to disappear. Ha! Hansu swirled his tongue around at the guy who used the feather when he merely just broke the trait with Nirmaha's ring. Maybe it was because he valued safety over anything, but his ability to sense danger was beyond everyone else. He was going to ignore it and look for a chance to clean up, so he didn't show anything, but that guy had decided to run as soon as things didn't work out according to his plan. You didn't spend 20 years in vain, huh? Hansu applauded Miyamoto as he ran away. The way he ran was amazing as well. An unstable world tree leaf had a short teleportation range and the location was random also. But from the light surrounding his body, it seemed like he had quite an intact leaf. With that, then he could probably run away to anywhere in the world tree mountain range. It seems like he was going to wait until the dimensional door opened in a safe place. But there was something that guy didn't know. That when you become the administrator of the world tree, it wasn't hard to find someone who had Miyamoto's level of power. Which meant if he wanted to hide, then he had to get to a place that even Hansu had trouble getting to. I shall help you a bit. So your feather wouldn't go to waste. Hansu lightly laughed and then started to raise up the relic's mana code. Soon the cross on his forehead started to shine. At those words the world tree, which was the reason of the teleportation power, started to change the coordinates of the teleportation. And soon Miyamoto's body disappeared within the light. Miyamoto looked at his surroundings after coming out from the light. The place he had chosen to run away was the sanctuary he had created in the end of the world tree just in case of an unexpected event. But Miyamoto realized that something was wrong. A cold wind blew past his face. Only white clouds could be seen around him instead of the underground sanctuary. This is branch. Miyamoto spat out a puzzled sound after checking beneath his feet. An extremely thick branch of the world tree that felt like the ground. But the problem wasn't that. Bzzzzzzzzzzzzzzz rapid beatings of wings. And they weren't just coming from one location. A loud noise was coming out from all around the clouds around him. God damn it. The Wasp Legion. A place where not even a red zone adventurer who came to the branches for artifacts set their foot into. Miyamoto's expression got covered in fear. Quack. And soon the huge wing-beating sound started to resonate from around Miyamoto. I'll come to take the things you have later. Hansu coldly looked into the location in the sky and then jumped back into the Ouroboros. Since there weren't any more disturbances, he just needed to smash one more nerve. Anyways. Why is the clone controlling it like this? There's no way that this guy would stay quiet like this. Hansu stopped rushing in and gazed at the skull of the Ouroboros where the clone would be. Proofreader's note: regular chapter 2/3. Chapter 90. Wasp Legion, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. One of the departed souls, Baek Jongsang, freaked out as the countless amounts of skills on his body stopped working. What? Did something happen? There was no way Miyamoto had died. Jongsang quickly looked towards Miyamoto, who would be at the nerve in the distance. And then squinted his eyes. Not there. Did he really die? Hook. Jongsang clenched his teeth and dodged the tail which rushed towards him while he was thinking about other things. It's harder without the skills. The skills they had were also amazing. But it was a system where all the core skills were owned and shared by Miyamoto. And once all those skills disappeared, the intensity of the battle suddenly multiplied by several fold. Damn it. We might die when the situation is like this. Jongsang clenched his teeth. Since the situation was so dangerous, even Miyamoto could die. Since the strongest person after Miyamoto, himself, had been struggling like this. But for a person who had been surviving for 20 years to disappear like this. Something's amiss. The others didn't know, but Jongsang, who had been the longest with Miyamoto, knew about him a bit more. Miyamoto was a person who usually cared for his image but then would throw all of them as sacrifice in order to survive. Only such a dangerous situation didn't exist, and they were only on the same boat because he gave them strength, but he was definitely not a good ally to have. But for the person who was so focused on living to die this easily and quietly. This was important. Since if Miyamoto was killed by someone with evil intentions, then they won't be able to get exempt from it either. Since it couldn't be part of them, so there was only one suspect. Jongsang, who had been making a wondering expression, realized that this wasn't the time for that. Since it looked like he would die at this moment if they didn't finish off the Ouroboros. Let's focus. They just needed to burn one more nerve after this. It wasn't impossible even without Miyamoto. I'll find out. After. Jongsang madly rushed towards the Ouroboros after finishing his thoughts. Kududududu. Hansu pulled out the divine stone fragment from the heart of the Ouroboros. Boom, 3 fragments now. The clone ran away, huh? He ran towards the head as soon as he paralyzed the movements of the Ouroboros. Just in case the clone was there. But it had been a while since it had left. Did it go to the Wasp Legion? Wasp Legion. The last of the 4 great calamities. Unlike the other calamities who showed off a humongous body along with an inner defensive system, this thing had a queen and hundreds of thousands of soldier wasps protecting it. It was a meager number in comparison to the parasites, but each one's strength couldn't even be compared. Since even the Ouroboros couldn't climb up because it feared that swarm. They're quite befitting as the gateway. There weren't any tricks that would work against the Wasp Legion's queen. Since it would instantly get rid of things that would become a threat to the queen because of its cautiousness. This time it's really a face-to-face. He couldn't be bothered to fight hundreds of thousands of the Wasp soldiers. He had to aim for the queen while others were busy fighting off the wasps and kill it off instantly. The battle power of the queen was the same as Akuma and maybe even beyond that. At least this guy didn't fall off. The thrashing Ouroboros just froze up while tightly coiling around the world tree as all its nerves were disconnected. Though he had sent in a neurotoxin in order to prevent this from the start, but he was scared that it would fall because the movements of it had been so vicious, but thankfully such a thing didn't happen. If this thing was left alone, then it will slowly get absorbed by the world tree and become the nutrients for it. Good. At that moment somebody walked towards Hansu. Baek Jongsang asked Hansu immediately as soon as he barely caught his breath. Anyways, what are you going to do now? Are you trying to kill the final one too? Jongsang then looked into the army above in the sky. The high branches couldn't be seen because they were covered by the clouds, but people around the level of departed souls and high levels within the 6 pillars knew as to what was hidden within the cloud. Since it wasn't just 1 or 2 who had been eaten after setting foot in there. The wasps nibbled up the branches and then brought it to the queen. The queen would then swallow those sturdy branches and give birth to a new wasp larvae. The larvae created like this would be transferred to a nearby world tree leaf nearby by a grown wasp. From that spot the larvae will receive the protection of the grown wasp as it nibbled upon the world tree leaf and grew up to become a new wasp. Of course the condensed area around the queen and the larvae was a prohibited zone, but there were always some people who were blinded by greed and ventured deep within. If they get caught by a wasp on the way in, then they would instantly become food for the larvae. These things didn't eat the leaves because they liked it. They just couldn't come down because the other calamities were down there. They were only so because they grew up from leaves, but if they absorb a human's traits then they would become a stronger wasp. That's even more dangerous. Jongsang mumbled quietly. Since the Ouroboros was scary, but that thing was even more so. Unlike the Ouroboros who waited for them while it sucked on the toxic waters, that thing was extremely direct in trying to multiply the swarm and was very offensive. Since it was more befitting to call them a race if the calamities until now could be called single organisms. But thankfully they didn't come down from the branches. Since they were the favorite snacks of the Ouroboros, even though they were dangerous. If they fly up, then the Ouroboros would just simply stretch its long body and chew them up. Wait. Jongsang thought up to that point and quickly looked into the sky. Then what would the Wasp Legion who hadn't come down until now do? Jongsang realized that his worry was a foreshadowing after watching the sky for a while. It's too quiet. Hansu laughed as he looked at that Jongsang. There's no way those guys would act that rashly when they need to protect the queen. From the queen's perspective it was good that her enemies had died off one by one, but on the other hand it could have been dangerous for it too. There was no way the Wasp Legion would act rashly when they needed to protect the queen in such a situation. I should still hurry the preparations. He didn't know what tricks the clone had up his sleeves, but he needed to do what he had to. When Hansu tried to quickly run down the world tree in order to organize the situation below, Jongsang opened up and spoke the question that's been stuck in his mouth after some pondering. Did Miyamoto die? What happened? They were too busy because they were trying to keep themselves alive, so they couldn't pay attention to Miyamoto in the distance, but Hansu had the whole battlefield within his sight. He would know exactly what had happened. Hansu shrugged his shoulders at those words. He went somewhere with the feather. It seems like he fell in danger while I was saving Sophia and wasn't paying attention, but don't worry. Since it looked like he ran away safely using the feather, he will probably rejoin us soon. Anyways, is the reason for all of you losing all your skills while fighting related to this? It's quite logical. Jongsang himself didn't know all the functions of the fragment of a soul which he had received. There was a possibility of the skills sharing being disconnected when a teleportation occurred or they got too far from each other. He might even send them a message with his life intact. And according to Sophia's words, Hansu had actually saved her from dying. Since there was no reason for him to save Sophia if he was going to clean them all up. There weren't any faults with Hansu's words, but the back of the head of Jongsang, who had been living in Red Zone for over 15 years, itched. Jongsang backed off after completing his thoughts. Okay. Let's go down first. That I need to talk to the other guys. Including the 6 pillars. Zhang Sang looked at Han Su with a slight uncertainty and then followed behind him downwards. Teclan made a bitter expression as he saw the giant body of the Ouroboros which could be seen from between the branches. He knew as soon as the poison-like foreign object came into the body of the Ouroboros that he would soon invade. But there wasn't anything he could do, since he hadn't gained the power of the king yet. It had already been a long time since Teclan finished his pondering and came up. Instead of sticking by the thing he couldn't control, it was better to gain control of the thing that lived in the branches. It would be good if that guy died whilst fighting the Ouroboros and he could just finish him off if he didn't. And that work wasn't working out very well. Bzzzzzzzzz Teclan looked at the giant hornet-shaped queen in front of him. Larvae that would become wasp soldiers were constantly being created from the lower abdomen of the queen. Even more so than usual. Nothing is easy. It was very frustrating to have his ankles caught up in such a place when he didn't even know the status of his race. Teclan thought of an event of the past while focusing on his work and sighing. The dried-up trunk of the world tree. Skeletal branches. Destroyed roots. It wasn't like this when the Elvenheims existed and the world tree was normal. The branches and the leaves which covered the sky supplied all Elvenheims with teleportations. The fruit of the world tree which stimulated the growth hormone surprisingly shortened the 100 years of time it required an Elvenheim to reach adulthood to 5 years. The tree had sucked up the toxic waters and created the land for the Elvenheim to live and supplied the endless nutritional fluid to eat. The population which always stayed low due to the extremely long growth period and the low fertility rate even with the magical engineering technology exploded within the 100 years after the world tree was created. This is why I have to obtain this world tree. Then he needed to call his race to this side. If his race, which was close to extinction, wanted to return to the days of the past, then the world tree was a necessity. Since the basis of the strength of a race was their numbers in the end. This is why he hadn't killed the world tree after he created the calamities. Since he had to revive it again. I need the relics you have. At the same time he needed to kill the other races beneath. There's only one race that can receive the protection of the world tree. Living together was impossible. Once a race started receiving the protection of the world tree, then all other races will be treated as foreign objects and get thrown out into the void by the world tree. This is the reason why he had wiped off the Elvenheims. Since their race could not receive the protection if the Elvenheims existed. And it was the same for the ones below. Thinking about it. The thing I tried to completely suppress was greed. His goal was the relics. Which meant that he didn't really need to completely control the calamities. Since he just needed to kill that guy and get the race below extinct. And because of this Teclan was not currently trying to suppress his greed of wanting to rule. Rather he was stimulating his greed even more and was focusing on fanning it. If the Ouroboros was an organism that focused on eating, this one was for breeding. The huge amounts of larvae that constantly popped out proved this. Good. In normal circumstances he would have never created this many larvae no matter how greedy he was. Since the world tree's leaves were way too scarce to feed all these larvae. But wasn't there an amazing source of food? Ouroboros. I need you to help me in a slightly different way now. The larvae followed the queen's orders and burrowed into the branches. And then got onto the exterior which supplied the nutritional fluid and started to swim somewhere. Churururk, the harsh flow of the nutritional fluid rushed towards the larvae, but it was still the larvae of a wasp soldier. There was nothing to say about its sturdiness and strength. But the larvae that were heading towards the pillar immediately stuck onto the walls of the exterior as a strange scent could be detected. The scent of a predator. But it was now a dead predator. It would now just be meat that would become nutrition for them. The larvae dug out of the exterior and then landed on the corpse of the giant snake coiled around the world tree. And the tens of thousands of larvae that had arrived started to devour the giant body of the Ouroboros. The larvae were thrilled. The genes of an extremely strong and vicious existence that couldn't even be compared to the soft leaves. The larvae prepared to become a new existence as they ate up the meat that was filled with those genes and the nutrition. Proofreaders note this is a sponsored chapter. Is it just me or the less calamities there are the more dangerous the situation is? Changed Sophia Vardra to Sophia Vardra and royal bees to Wasp Legion. Will edit previous chapters.